above the mountaintops. And I would say that they even went down into the canyons in several instances, probably 100 feet. But I could see them against the snow, of course, on Mount Rainier, and against the snow on Mount Adams as they were flashing, and against a high ridge that happens to lay in between Mount Rainier and Mount Adams. But when I observed the tail end of the last one passing Mount Adams, and I was at an angle near Mount Rainier from it, but I looked at my watch, and it showed 1 minute and 42 seconds. Well, I still thought, well, that's pretty fast, and I didn't stop to think what the distance was between the two mountains. Well, I landed at Yakima, Washington, and Al Baxter was there to greet me, and he saw up here. And he told me, I guess I better change my brand. But he kind of gave me a mysterious sort of a look that maybe I had seen something he didn't know. And, well, I just kind of forgot it then till I got down at Pendleton, and I began looking at my map and taking measurements on it. And the best calculation I could figure out, now even in spite of error, would be around 1,200 miles an hour, because making the distance from Mount Rainier to Mount Adams in, we'll say, approximately 2 minutes, it's almost, it'd be around 25 miles per minute. Now, allowing for error, we can give them 3 minutes or 4 minutes to make it, and they're still going more than 800 miles an hour, and to my knowledge, there isn't anything that I read about outside of some of the German rockets that would go that fast. These were flying in more or less a level, constant altitude. They weren't going up and they weren't going down. They were just simply flying straight and level, and I laughed when I told the pilots at Pendleton, I said, they sure must have had a tailwind, but it didn't seem to help me much. But to the best of my knowledge and the best of my description, that is what I actually saw, and like I told the Associated Press, I'd be glad to confirm it with my hands on a Bible, because I did see it. And whether it has anything to do with our Army or our intelligence, or whether it has to do with some foreign country, I don't know. But I did see it, and I did clock it, and I just happened to be in a beautiful position to do it, and it's just as much a mystery to me as it is to everyone else who's been calling me the last 24 hours wondering what it was.
So it has often been said that why don't astronomers see UFOs? As a matter of fact, they do. In a very recent report by Professor Sturrock of Stanford University, who queried all the members of the American Astronomical Society, found that 53% of those who responded said that, in their opinion, the UFO problem was worthy of scientific study. And what is more, 64 of the astronomers who responded gave what would be called UFO reports, objects, sightings that they personally had made at their observatories frequently, which to them was unexplained.
The American Broadcasting Company and affiliated stations present Headline Edition with Taylor Grant. Today's edition presents a roundup of the latest developments in the finding of a flying disc. Late this afternoon, a bulletin from New Mexico suggested that the widely publicized mystery of the flying saucers may soon be solved. Army Air Force officers reported that one of the strange discs had been found and inspected sometime last week. Our correspondents in Los Angeles and Chicago have been in contact with Army officials endeavoring to obtain all possible late information. Joe Wilson reports to us now from Chicago. The Army may be getting to the bottom of all this talk about the so-called flying saucers. As a matter of fact, the 509th Atomic Bomb Group headquarters at Roswell, New Mexico, reports that it has received one of the discs which landed on a ranch outside Roswell. The disc landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico, and the rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brizell was the man who discovered the saucer. Colonel William Blanchard of the Roswell Air Base refuses to give details of what the flying disc looks like. In Fort Worth, Texas, where the object was first sent, Brigadier General Roger Ramey says that it is being shipped by air to the AAF Research Center at Wright Field, Ohio. A few moments ago, I talked to officials at Wright Field, and they declared that they expect the so-called flying saucer to be delivered there, but that it hasn't arrived as yet.
One of the most important findings that has been made about this phenomenon is that it is global in scope. In other words, it doesn't belong to the French or the Americans or the British. There have been waves of sightings, usually lasting about a few weeks or a month and a half, over in very concentrated fashions in certain areas of the world. There have been such waves in Western Europe in 1954, for example. In this country in 1947, we know of waves in the Soviet Union, in China, in Australia, especially in Western Australia. And what is typical about these waves is that the people from all these different cultures around the world are describing the same thing in their own terms. What they are describing is an object that seems to be able to maneuver, it seems to be a technology, it seems to come to the ground and leave traces. And there have been rings especially that have been found, burned circles that have been found very commonly in Australia that are absolutely identical to things that have been catalogued in this country, in France. There is now a catalogue of such traces that encompasses more than 1,000 sightings.
Many people consider that if UFOs represent extraterrestrial intelligence, then they would simply land on the United States White House lawn and prove to the world that they exist. In 1952, those people almost had their proof.
Perhaps the most important sighting of all time was the so-called Washington merry-go-round that occurred in late July 1952. It seems to have been a whole set of anomalous objects that appeared over secure airspace in the Capitol, over all of the famous important buildings that paced craft around Washington National Airport, that was seen by a variety of radars at the time.
At 11:40 p.m. on Saturday, July 19, 1952, an air traffic controller at Washington National Airport spotted 7 blips in a corner of the radar scope. They were moving at 100 miles per hour and were heading for the Capitol. No aircraft were known to be in the area. Jet interceptors were scrambled to investigate the UFOs, but within moments, the radar blips had disappeared. When the jets landed, the UFOs returned.
That sighting has never been adequately explained. Because it happened in Washington, D.C., it alerted everybody right on up to the President of the United States and caused a national press conference by the Chief of Intelligence of the Air Force to try to calm everybody down.
At his press conference, General Sanford, Air Force Intelligence Director, confirmed that the objects were not secret American weapons and reiterated the Air Force's obligation to investigate the UFO.
We have received and analyzed between 1,000 and 2,000 reports that have come to us from all kinds of sources. Of this great mass of reports, we have been able adequately to explain the great bulk of them, explain them to our own satisfaction. However, there have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things. It is this group of observations that we now are attempting to resolve. We have, as of date, come to only one firm conclusion with respect to this remaining percentage, and that is that it does not contain any pattern of purpose or of consistency that we can relate to any conceivable threat to the United States.
I think it's time to open the books on questions that have remained in the dark, on the question of government investigations of UFOs. It's time to find out what the truth really is that's out there. We ought to do it really because it's right. We ought to do it because the American people, quite frankly, can handle the truth. And we ought to do it because it's the law.